they believe that they're going to get something out of a conversation with you as opposed to a pitch from a salesperson, you're not an annoying pest. You're someone that's earned the right for engagement.
All right, welcome to today's episode of Top Down. I'm Josh Mastel, your host and the CEO of Uproar Partners. We drive growth for business owners and startups by owning the sales process and the go-to-market sales execution. Today, we're talking with Tony Hughes. Tony is the CEO and Managing Director of RSVP Selling and author of multiple books, including Combo Prospecting. He is ranked by Top Sales Magazine as the most influential person in professional selling in Asia Pacific and teaches modernized selling within the MBA program at the University of Technology in Sydney. He's a best-selling author, award-winning blogger, and the most read LinkedIn author globally on the topic of sales leadership. Tony speaks at conferences internationally, including the Salesforce World Tour events, and sits on a number of advisory boards. And he's going to share some amazing tactical sales processes and tips that you can use to fire up your sales processes and get through the noise that buyers are experiencing today. Enjoy.
So Tony, obviously you got an insane resume working with companies in the sales world, consulting world, training world. I'd like to hear, why don't you fill the audience in a bit on what's keeping you busy right now? What are you doing in the present moment?
The thing I'm doing in the present moment is I'm spending a lot of time researching, writing about, and speaking about how technology, especially AI, artificial intelligence, is changing the world of selling. I certainly believe that there's, in the future and the near future, there's going to be less sales managers and there's going to be less people doing that inside sales rep, so the ISR, BDR kind of role inside an organization.
Wow, I can't let you say that and not dig deeper into it. Let's talk about that. What's some stuff that you're finding in your research? Like, what's around the bend?
If we have a look at the biggest problem that most organizations say they have, this is not what the biggest problem really is, but the biggest problem they say they have is that they just don't have enough sales pipeline. Most salespeople, most sales managers will say that me as an individual, us as an organization, we know how to sell, but the problem we have is there's just not enough pipe. And the truth is, not enough pipe is a symptom of deeper issues. Often people haven't really thought hard enough about the intrinsic value they offer the markets they pursue. They haven't really thought deeply about what an ideal customer profile really looks like. And then the buyer personas within those accounts that they need to really tailor their messaging to. So right at the foundation, people are failing to build pipeline because they don't have the right value narrative. They don't know how to carry a conversation. And then the next thing that's really killing them is they just don't have the right level of activity. So I've spoken in the past a lot about the fact that the rise of the silent sales floor is just killing organizations. People have drunk the social selling Kool-Aid where they think I don't need to make phone calls anymore. I can just go hyper passive in digital and social channels and I'll be able to sell that way. So people need to build pipeline, but what's happening is about 85% of what an inside sales rep does to go build pipeline is actually automatable. And the reason I say that is the most powerful way of engaging somebody is through trigger events. If we can find points of context that give us a reason in their mind, something that makes sense for us to be talking to them. And then the other thing is that the fastest path to revenue is referrals. Trust has always been incredibly important in sales. The speed of trust, all business is done at the speed of trust. So if you can combine referrals with trigger events, it's a way for you to really accelerate what you're doing with pipeline. And because 85% of it is automatable, and what I mean by that is this. If we think about, if I was a rep, say at Salesforce, the world's leading CRM company, my wheelhouse, my target market is really heads of sales. So usually the CEO of an organization will bring in a new head of sales because he or she believes that the previous person running sales wasn't doing it well enough. And they'll hire this new person in, and that person will be the golden-haired child for about 5 months. And they'll give them what that head of sales says they need to be successful. So if I was selling a CRM system, it's a massive trigger event for a new head of sales to join an organization because they're going to want to drive change. People who've been in a role for a long time, if you talk about innovation or change, all they hear is risk and work. So you want to find organizations that are growing, people that want to affect change, and people that have got license. They've got political and economic power inside their organization. So monitoring for trigger events, the reality is human beings are pretty bad at sifting through huge amounts of data. I advocate very strongly that every B2B seller should have Sales Navigator from LinkedIn as a basic fundamental tool. You need a CRM system, you need Sales Navigator, you need then sales intelligence tools, things that will give you people's cell phone numbers, for example. And obviously you need a phone. And if you have those four things, you can absolutely go and crush it. But the reality is I see people with Sales Navigator and they fumble around in the dark with how to use it. They're not setting up the safe searches that will give them the alerts about the trigger events of new roles. And a role-based trigger event is just one example, but the really tough thing in the world today is that buyers have three very unreasonable expectations of every seller. So before the sellers ever talk to them and ask one question at all, the buyer is expecting the seller to know them. They're expecting them to personalize the conversation and tailor it. And they're expecting them to be a mind reader to basically anticipate of all of the things the seller could talk about or offers, which of those few things are most important to them. So truly know me, personalize the engagement, and anticipate what's important to me before I've ever spoken with you. So online research is incredibly important.
Love it. Tony, awesome stuff already. I appreciate that. Before we get off that topic of trigger events, because I love trigger events. I guess I don't really necessarily call them exactly trigger events, but can you give us another example? I love the change of employment. We got a new person head in the fold. What's another one that you've seen out there?
Let me go more maybe B2C, but it also applies to business. If someone has a negative experience with your competitor, let's imagine, for example, that you're a rep selling into corporates for travel, for an airline. People today, if they have a bad experience, tend to tweet about it. So again, there's very simple tools where you can monitor for negative sentiment about your competitor's brand, even for your own brand, obviously to head people off at the door before they leave. But if someone tweets that they're desperately unhappy with an experience they've had with your competitor, it gives you a cause for outreach, and you simply contact them and say, I'm so sorry you had that experience. We would love to be able to look after you. And you use that to start a conversation with them. So you don't badmouth the competition, but you just recognize that when someone's in a window of dissatisfaction, that window closes pretty quick. I know for myself years ago, I was really happy with my airline that I've got gazillions of miles within status. I was really unhappy, and I tweeted years ago to see, are they monitoring social channels? And they weren't. But I thought, wow, if their competitor had called me and said, hey, Tony, so sorry you had that experience. We find that the only thing that holds people back from trying us, because we pride ourselves on the level of service we give, the only thing that holds people back is they worry about walking away from their points and miles and status. If we were able to match that with your current airline, would you be willing to give us a go? And the answer would absolutely have been yes, if they'd done it within that window of dissatisfaction. Because the reality is, about 3 or 4 days later, I just rationalized in my own mind that all travel's horrible, all airlines have these problems. It's just how it is, when you're a business traveler. Business travel is no fun. Just get over it. It was a short window where they could have switched me.
And I think the most important thing for our listeners there is what the airline would have done brilliantly is they would have pre-predicted what the objection was going to be. But most companies don't take the time to think about that. Like if my customer wants to come to me, what's the objection that's probably holding them back, and have the answer for it already going into it. That's what I love the most about that story.
That's so true. And, just on the topic of objections briefly is I got kind of a pretty radical view about objections. My view is that objections are for amateurs, that if you get an objection, it's typically because you sought progression before the other person was ready. So we should always be testing. Trying to close a deal or seek progression should never be a white knuckle roller coaster ride while we wonder what's going to happen. There should be a level of confidence. So we want to work with the person. And the thing that all sellers need to think about is, I'm seeking alignment. I'm trying to find people that fit my ideal customer profile, that think, feel, and believe the things that line them up really well to be a great fit for us, to be a good client, because alignment is far more productive than evangelism.
100%. And I talk about negotiation quite a bit. And I think the misperception to your point here is people think negotiation is a battle. I'm going to give you a higher price so you can give me a lower price. So we're going to fight our way. The word negotiation just means to come to an agreement. So I love that you bring up the alignment piece. It can actually be pretty simple when you approach it that way. It doesn't need to be a battle. I want to hop over to something you said earlier, because I think me and you are preaching the same exact message here. And I love that you brought this up about the silent sales floor. I go into some companies sometimes that say, hey, Josh, we're struggling. Our sales team is dying and we're not doing well. Can you come take a peek? And I walk into the sales floor, but it feels like the morgue. And that's my first tall tale sign. I mean, I'm a high emotion, high energy kind of guy. So my sales teams always ran pretty high octane. But what's your diagnosis? What's going on in that world that's causing that?
It's increasingly becoming filled with millennials. That is in of itself a problem. They're very much digital native and they don't naturally call someone as their initial preferred mode of outreach. So they definitely start things in the digital world. But the reality is as human beings, we have always been wired to treat the telephone in the context of sales and business development, to treat the telephone like it's covered in spiders. None of us like rejection. None of us like rejection. And us as human beings can often easily think the worst. So we misinterpret people not responding to us. We misinterpret that as people rejecting us. And the thing we know, depending on whose research we want to believe, but it's anywhere from sort of 7 to 13 touches is what's needed before you're going to get a person to engage with you. And it's breathtaking that people make 1 or 2 or 3 attempts in sales and they basically just dead the potential suspect or prospect, saying that they're not interested. So we need to be persistent. So my latest book I've just published is called Combo Prospecting, and it's the wisdom of 100,000 people that have been engaging with me over years in my blog. I'm approaching 300,000 followers on my blog right now, but with the 100,000 of them that engaged with me over years, I got all of the wisdom about what really works. And what we know is that phone on its own doesn't work. Email on its own doesn't work. Digital on its own doesn't work. Social on its own doesn't work. The yield rates are way too low. It's too easy for people to ignore us. And buyers have just got this white wall of noise being blasted at them all the time. To break through, we've got to use combinations. And what I found is that you've got to make the phone the thing that's at the heart of what you're doing with outreach, because selling is very much a human process. And if you fail to make it very human, then we're very much destined for disruption. So what we've got to do is we've got to lead with the phone, leave a voicemail, and send an email, and do those in instant succession, within 90 seconds. So what happens is the person's phone rings. They think, I don't know who this is. I'll dump the call. Next thing they see that there's been a voicemail left. They listen to the voicemail. Then they see an email come in. And then we need to even up our game and send a text message, send a Twitter direct message, send an email. But you want this person thinking, holy hell, this person's determined. I may as well get back to them. And so long as your narrative is all about them and not about you, and if they believe that they're going to get something out of a conversation with you as opposed to a pitch from a salesperson, then you're not an annoying pest. You're someone that's earned the right for engagement. So it's really important that sellers get back on the phone, because otherwise they're going to allow what they do just to become a commodity that can be replaced by technology.
Our listeners are, founders of tech startups, small business owners, sales leaders of large organizations. Let's say someone that's listening right now is like, yep, I walk out to my sales floor and I got that morgue. It's the silent sales floor. What would you, if you were coaching them, you were consulting them, what would you tell them are some easy action items they could be doing to start shifting that for their people?
Well, the first thing is, if you're a CEO or a sales manager, if you're managing salespeople, the number one mistake that people make is they try and manage by results instead of managing the activities that feed into the objectives that then create the results. So the thing that's vitally important is the first thing is, people are not going to get back on the phone assertively if they don't have the right narrative. If they feel like they're cringing because they're just an annoying sales pest in people's lives, if they're just another piece of white noise, they're not going to go do it. So selling has first and foremost always been about the transference of belief, where the seller absolutely believes that they're making a positive difference in the life of their customer, both personally, professionally, and within their business. And then they need a narrative that talks about how their customers can move the needle on key metrics that really matter to that customer. So they've got to make sure they're full of belief. They've got to make sure that they've got the right narrative. And then they need to manage the activities that feed into your sales objectives. And there's a couple of things that are really important. The first is, if you're in tech and you're selling to the chief marketing officer, the chief information officer, the CTO, the CEO, the COO, all of the C-suite, the thing we know is that the best time to call is from 7:45 in the morning until 8:45, and then after 4 p.m. up until about 6 p.m. You call after 6 p.m., people can feel they're invading their personal life. But senior people start early, and then they tend to get out of the endless meetings of the day around 4:30 p.m. so they can clean up their day, so that they leave knowing what their priorities are for tomorrow. So what I see, the same as you, I'm putting words in your mouth. I think you're going to agree with this, though, is when I get clients ask me to go and sit on the sales floor and just sort of observe, the first thing I observe is people start drifting in at 9:15 in the morning, and they check LinkedIn and Facebook and email, and then they drift off and have a coffee, and they're all social. And then about 10:10 in the morning, you might hear someone make the first call of the day. And my view is you've already lost before you've begun. What sellers need to do, and what the leaders of businesses need to encourage them to do, is to time block the outbound calling. So and when I say outbound calling, it'll be with a combo, because you phone, you leave a voicemail, you send an email, you text them, you connect with them in LinkedIn, you send emails, you do combinations of outreach that show them that you're determined, because we don't know what channel works best for our buyer. So try all of them until you find the one that does. And then whenever you can, just get back on the phone. So if leaders get their people to time block, put on breakfast, get them going early, but get them to do their calling, in my view, a minimum of 30 combos a day is what it takes to go build pipe in the world of B2B selling. So, and you need 2 1-hour blocks to execute 30 to 50 a day. And you need to make sure you don't go home that day until you've got your morning organized for the following day. So that's really what I'd encourage them to do.
Man, that is, Tony, I think me and you are speaking the same exact language. This is good stuff. So I want to give you my opinion on something. I want to see if you agree with me on this. So there's a lot of companies I look at and talk to and sales teams, and they know that their people aren't hitting it hard enough. They're not getting in early enough to do the work, which I cannot agree with you any more than that. If you're making your first phone call at 10 o'clock, you're getting beat. My team is beating you by 2.5 hours. So the problem, though, that I see is the manager, who's the one that's upset with the team that's not hitting hard enough, they're the ones that aren't in until 9:30, 10 o'clock themselves, expecting other people to do it. So a lot of times it's hard for me to put the mirror up and point the finger back at the leader whose fault it is, in my opinion. But what's your take on that?
I agree 100%. Let me tell you a true story, and I'll give you the name of this guy so those that are listening to this can have a look at his profile on LinkedIn. It's a guy called Rahul Kumar, Kumar. He's in Sydney, Australia. You find him in LinkedIn. Rahul was the managing director of Microsoft's biggest partner in this region for learning, so e-learning and classroom learning. Now, he was the MD of the operation, and he had 40 people that worked for him in sales and marketing. He gave himself a bigger quota than any one of his sales reps. He personally did an hour of dialing every day. And his rationale was this: we'll do bigger deals if we can sell into the C-suite, and it's easy for me as the CEO of the company to get access to other C-suite people because I've got a title that should make that easier. So I'm going to give myself a bigger quota than anybody else because I should be able to enter accounts at a more senior level and do bigger deals. And he led by example, and he got on the sales floor to make the calls. He didn't hide away in his office to do it. So there's another CEO I've been working with in a financial services company, Daniel Blizzard, amazing guy. And he sits in the open office, not in the corner office that's walled off with a door. He sits in the open office with his salespeople, and he makes calls and does business development himself as well. And these guys are a big financial services organization. But both of these guys, Daniel Blizzard and Rahul Kumar, both believe that if you want to create a culture, then culture is really something that you live by example. Culture is nothing more, nothing less than the behavior of the leaders. So if you say we've got a customer-centric culture, we've got a sales-centric culture, we've got a service-centric culture, then you go live that by example. Make yourself accessible and do the things you're asking others to do.
Man, that's good. And there might be some sales leaders listening to this right now that are like, oh, I can't sit out on the floor and make sales calls. What if I get shot down, or what if I blow a deal? And I used to make sales calls in front of my team, and I used to actually love it when I'd get shot down on a cold call because I wanted my team to see how I responded to getting shot down, because we're human. It's going to happen. It can actually be an asset to you for your team to see you fail if you're out there in the public with them. So I love that.
That is bang on the money, and selling is brutal. It's good for them to see you get rejected and fail, dust yourself off, and then go make the next call.
Yep, it's a land war. So I want to hit on something here with your brain if possible. So I know you have a lot of experience in the enterprise world, which I value a ton of. And a lot of our listeners are in the tech startup world. I don't know how much experience you have in that, in that field, but to me, the principles are all the same. It's just a bit more of a struggle to getting started in the startup world. But what advice do you have for a founder who has a new software, a new SaaS product that's just coming onto the market? He's just thinking about getting a sales team started. He himself maybe isn't the best salesperson because he's kind of a techie guy. What are some good first steps to be thinking about in that world as you're forming your sales team and your sales plan?
So, Josh, this is exactly my world. These are the people I work with all the time, and I've run tech startups and software as a service companies. And my biggest client is actually Salesforce, who's obviously the poster child of SaaS globally. So here's my advice. As the owner of the business, so much of the value that you see in your business is from all of the blood, sweat, tears, and money that you've poured into creating your software tech-based solution or your app. But the reality is you've got to get out of that world and you've got to become crystal clear and laser focused in your messaging about the problems that you solve for which people in which industries. So you've got to obsess about what problem do I really solve and how does the solving of that problem actually monetize for my customer? And then I've got to make my conversation all about that. So rather than calling people up and saying, hi, this is who I am, this is what we do, and this is how it works, rather than that, we need to call them up and say, we work with your style companies in your industry, and a common thing we see is some of our customers have been able to make a difference in these areas. Would it make sense to have a conversation? So I know I made all that vague, which is not very powerful because all generic, but depending on what it is that you actually do, if you're able to call a person and say, we work with travel agents and we know it's a ferociously competitive business, but we've been working with other travel agents where they've been able to achieve, and then you talk about those key metrics that really matter to people. And people want to meet if they feel they're going to get an insight about what others in their industry are doing to succeed. We've got to be very careful and generally avoid name dropping people's competitors. It's just a bad thing to do, but they want some insights about how others in their industry are moving the needle on things that matter. So that's what you've got to make the conversation about. Be crystal clear about what the business case would be for working with us, and make sure that you can evidence it.
I feel like when people hear messaging, they immediately they point at the marketing department and they go, oh, that's marketing's job to figure out what the message is on our website and all that kind of stuff. Do you have any further insight into how do you dig deep to find that perfect messaging? Do you talk to your customers? Do you lock yourself in an office? What's your plan for that?
Nothing good happens in your own office, right? So all the good stuff happens out in the field. So the typical way you can do that is you go and find your best customers and you ask them a couple of questions. There's two incredibly powerful questions that I really encourage people to ask. The first question is of the customer, what happened in your organization that started you down the path that eventually led to us? Now, salespeople go, oh yeah, I get it. I'll go and ask them, why did you select us over our competition? And I go, no, that's not the question at all. It's not the question. What triggered you? What started you down the path that where you thought you even needed the sort of technology that we do? So that'll start to let you know what to monitor for as far as trigger events go, and it starts to let you know what the business case would look like, right? The real problem they're trying to solve. Get away from symptom and get to root cause. The other thing that organizations really need to do when they're engaging with their customers is they need to simply say to them, and let's imagine they've been a customer of yours for 2 years. You simply say to them, how is your business positively, materially different now than what it was 2 years ago? And I'm not asking you to tell me, what, about our product, just with your business generally. So let me give you an example of this. I spoke at Salesforce World Tour and they asked me to find one of their customers I could get up on stage and interview. And I thought, well, if I'm going to get someone up on stage and interview, it's got to be interesting. It's got to be compelling. So I found one of their clients, and the company is Corporate Traveler. They're part of the Flight Centre Travel Group, which is a global organization, company I've done a bit of work with. And the head of sales for they've got 7 business units, but of one of their business units, Corporate Traveler, when I asked him that question, he said to me, well, we had 50, that's half of our sales force turning over every year. We were missing our number, and very few people of ours were actually making quota. And I, the head of the business, had signed up to, crazily, I'd signed up to an aggressive growth quota for the Australian region based on ramping from 55 people to 85 people. And he said, I got it from 55 to 65 people and I stopped. I realized what we're doing was insane. And we needed to address culture and we needed to address enablement of our people. We'd been giving them technology thinking that was the enablement box ticked. And what they did is they got staff churn down from 50% to 20%. They got the majority of their people all hitting their number. And as a business, they hit that growth number based on having 85 people just with 55, with a much better culture, much happier people. For example, and I thought, wow, like that's an amazing turnaround in 2 years. Now, could all of that be attributed to the fact that they use Salesforce software? Absolutely not, right? It was a whole lot of things. And yes, they gave their people Salesforce Enterprise Edition. They gave them Sales Navigator. They gave them some sales intelligence tools. They invested in training, but they did a lot of stuff around culture and getting people far more engaged. So it was all of those things together that created the result. But again, if you were selling Salesforce software, being able to go tell that story, anyone you were selling to in the travel industry, it's a really tough market for those companies. So you understand what the business case is for doing something.
I think last maybe a couple questions here to go back to what we mentioned earlier when you made that brilliant point about getting your messaging right. So I'm the founder of a tech startup. I need to start scaling. I got to get my messaging right. So let's say I did that. Now what? How can I start putting boots on the ground? What's the best advice you have for them there?
You've got to get your messaging right. You've then got to profile the ideal customer. You've then got to understand the personas of the people that buy. So increasingly today, it's a world of consensus-based decision-making. So there's a group of people who will all need to be on board before they're going to make the decisions. So you need to map those people and know what's important to them. So in essence, you've sized your market, you've got your personas, you know what an ideal customer looks like, you've got the right narrative. Then what you need to do is you need to start to onboard salespeople, and you need to hold them accountable for the input metrics that are going to create the success. And you need to equip them with the right tools. So again, you need a good CRM. You don't want people walking out of the door with your IP. And you want to implement your CRM in a way that enables sales process. That's the only way that you'll capture accurate data. I'd really encourage everybody to read a great book. I'm going to recommend a few books. One of them is a book by Jason Jordan called Cracking the Sales Management Code. In my view, best book ever written on sales management. So you want to make sure you're managing those inputs and go and live by example. And the notion of separating pipeline creation from opportunity progression, this thing of we'll have inside sales reps, SDRs, and they'll hand off to field sellers. My view is make sure you've got a great marketing person, give them KPIs, targets, and even goal them and comp them on revenue rather than fluffy marketing metrics. But marketing is typically much better with tools and process than salespeople or sales managers are. So get them driving the whole funnel building piece, but also get your AEs, your field BDMs, account executives, get them also responsible for pipeline as well. Everyone should be spending 1 to 2 hours a day working on pipeline. So every day we need both oars in the water, and one oar is pipeline creation and the other oar is opportunity progression. So they need to be doing both, and just make sure you equip people with the right tools. So a good CRM, Sales Navigator, and sales intelligence tools, where they can source mobile phone numbers.
Final topic, quick couple questions, and this is kind of more selfish on my end, that you just seem like you're such a successful guy. You've done so much stuff. In terms of success, in your mind, what are some things that you've stood by that have helped you propel yourself in your career, whether that's some routine, principles you believe in, beliefs you believe in? Are there a few staples in your life that have helped you get to where you're at?
So the first thing really is you need to be a true believer. You need to have great values. Buyers aren't stupid. And if you're not all in on what it is that you're doing, then people really sense that. So you need to be a passionate believer in the difference you can make in customers' lives with that solution that you go and take to market. And then the other thing is you need complete integrity as a person. Selling can get a bum rap a lot of the time, but selling successfully is the thing that feeds everybody else. Selling is incredibly important. Everyone else depends on us, but you need to do it with complete, absolute integrity. And then the other thing is you need to have a really strong work ethic. So I often jokingly say that no plumber on the face of the planet enjoys sticking their arm up a sewer pipe, but they make a wonderful living and they just get over it. Pilots don't like filling out logbooks, but they just do it. There's lots of things you have to do if you want to be successful in life, and just embrace it and get on with it and be disciplined. It's being a passionate believer, it's having integrity, and it's being really disciplined in how you execute. And then the last thing I'd say to people is you have to quickly, and I mean quickly, start to embrace the technologies that are changing everything. If we don't learn to work with the technologies to become hyper effective in what we're doing, we will get replaced by them.
Man, Tony, what a stand-up guy. What an honor it's been to have this chat with you. Why don't you go ahead and fill our listeners in on where can we follow you? Where can we go get your books? Where can we reach out to you to come have you talk at our companies? Where can we find you?
Best way to find me is in LinkedIn. So just look for Tony Hughes inside LinkedIn. My sales methodology website is RSVP Selling, rsvpselling.com. And my public speaker website, if you want me to speak to do a keynote at a conference or a sales kickoff or work with your team, go to tonyhughes.com.au. My first book is called The Joshua Principle, Leaderships of Selling. It's about how to win a complex deal. And my second book, just published by the American Management Association and HarperCollins, is called Combo Prospecting, and you can get that in Amazon.
That is so awesome. Tony, is there a idol of yours, somebody you've always looked up to, that you've always wanted to meet, or a huge prospect right now that you've been hunting down that you want us to give a shout out or a tag to here? We'll tag them in our podcast to see if we can't get you in front of them.
I'm a huge fan of a couple of guys there in the States. Anthony E. Norino in the world of B2B selling is great. Jeb Blunt is awesome. And Mike Weinberg. And then the other guy would be Mark Hunter. I think those four guys there in the States are really good, trusted sources of content for anyone who's in the tech world that's selling B2B. All of those guys have got great content as well.
Tony, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Great to meet you. Looking forward to seeing what the future holds for you.
Thanks, Josh. All the best.
All right, just to recap, 3 things. Number 1, modern buyers want you to have done your research online before they talk to you. Embrace technology and use multiple points to contact on every outreach. Number 2, speaking of technology, the phone isn't dead. Don't let your sales floor go silent. Selling is human. Call people and hit them up with the right messaging. Tell them how you can help. And number 3, if you want to win like Tony, you've got to be a passionate, high-integrity believer in your business and have strong work ethic. Embrace the dirty work with a smile. Check Tony on LinkedIn by searching Tony J. Hughes or look below in the show notes. You can also visit tonyhughes.com.au or rsvpselling.com to get Tony's book, The Joshua Principle and Combo Prospecting, for some real wisdom. Please share this podcast and visit us at uproarpartners.com to find more sales management wisdom, or feel free to shoot me over an email at letshunt@uproarpartners.com. That's LETSHUNT@uproarpartners.com. Thanks for listening today, and remember, everyone wants to eat until it's time to hunt. Enjoy your day.